The Italian leather wallet fell to the supermarket floor with a dull thud. Thomas Westwood watched from a distance, disguised in worn clothes and a faded cap that hid part of his face. At 63 years old, the billionaire real estate tycoon had spent the last 2 months testing the humanity of the people around him. The diagnosis of advanced-stage pancreatic cancer had destroyed all his certainties about legacy and family. The wallet contained $3,000 in cash, no-limit credit cards, and documents that revealed his true identity. Thomas had deliberately dropped it next to a girl carrying 2 heavy bags of cheap groceries. She couldn't have been more than 17, wore a faded uniform from some fast food place, and torn sneakers that had clearly seen better days. The girl stopped immediately, her brown eyes fixed on the wallet for long seconds. Thomas felt his heart race as he watched every micro-expression on her face. Over the past 60 days, he had witnessed the worst of human nature. 5-star hotel managers had thrown him out of the entrance. Luxury store clerks had called security before he could even open his mouth. Even strangers on the street turned away in disgust when he asked for a simple glass of water. His own children, Daniel and Victoria, had shown interest only in the company's financial reports during their last visits to the hospital. No genuine hug. No real tears. Just disguised questions about the will and corporate succession. The pain of family rejection hurt more than any chemotherapy. The girl bent down and picked up the wallet carefully, as if holding something sacred. Thomas pretended to look for something on the shelves while watching her through the reflection of the display window. She opened the wallet slowly, and her eyes widened when she saw the amount of money. Her hands trembled slightly. For one terrible moment, Thomas thought she would simply keep everything and walk out the door. But the girl quickly closed the wallet and began looking around urgently. "Excuse me," she said to a woman passing by pushing a cart. "Did you see who dropped this wallet?" The woman just shook her head no and walked on, showing no interest at all. The girl walked up to the checkout and handed the wallet to the cashier. "Someone lost this here in aisle 5. There's a lot of money inside. It needs to be kept somewhere safe until the owner shows up." The cashier took the wallet with disdain. "Aren't you going to wait to return it personally? You're entitled to a reward, you know." "I can't wait," the girl replied, looking at the old watch on her wrist. "I'm late for work. I just wanted to make sure it got back to the owner." She adjusted the bags in her arms and started to walk away. "Wait," the cashier called with a sly smile. "At least your name? In case the owner wants to thank you." The girl hesitated for a second. "No need. He must already be desperate looking for it. Just give it back to him, please." And she hurried out through the automatic door. Thomas felt something break inside his chest. For the first time in months, it wasn't the physical pain of the illness. It was something else. Something he thought no longer existed in this rotten, self-interested world. He walked up to the cashier and asked for his wallet back, showing identification documents. The cashier handed everything over with a disappointed expression, clearly hoping to keep some of the money. Outside, a light rain began to fall over the parking lot. Thomas looked for the girl and found her waiting at the bus stop, shielding the bags from the moisture. He approached slowly, still dressed like a homeless man. "Thank you for returning my wallet," he said in a hoarse voice. The girl turned around, startled. Her eyes quickly examined him, and something like compassion crossed her face. "No need to thank me. Anyone would do the same." She pulled a crumpled $5 bill from her pocket. "Look, I know you must be having a hard time. Take this. Buy something warm to eat today. It's cold." Thomas froze. The girl who was clearly struggling to survive was offering him money. Not out of obligation. Not expecting anything in return. Just pure and inexplicable kindness. "I can't accept your money," he murmured, his voice breaking. "Of course you can," she insisted, placing the bill in his hand. "We all need help sometimes. There's no shame in that." The bus arrived, honking. The girl picked up her bags and climbed the steps with difficulty. Before the doors closed, she turned and waved at Thomas with a tired but genuine smile. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment saying what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. This helps the channel grow a lot. Thomas stood under the rain, holding the crumpled $5 as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. In that moment, with tears mixing with the water running down his face, He knew exactly what he needed to do. His lawyer would receive a call later that night. The will would be completely rewritten. Thomas spent the next 3 days investigating the girl's life. He discreetly hired a private investigator, something he never imagined doing for reasons so different from the usual ones. He discovered that her name was Isabel Morales. She was 17 years old, and she worked 2 jobs to support her sick mother and her younger brother. She studied at night at a public school and slept only 4 hours a day. The report included photos of her leaving the diner at 11 at night, walking miles back home because she didn't have money for the return bus fare. Meanwhile, Thomas was facing another battle. His children had discovered his disguised wanderings around the city and called an emergency meeting at the company's office. Daniel arrived first, wearing his $3,000 suit and the expression of superiority Thomas knew all too well. Victoria appeared minutes later, her heels echoing down the hallway like hammer blows of judgment. "Dad, we need to talk about your mental sanity," Daniel began without any preamble. He tossed photos onto the table that Thomas immediately recognized. They were images of him dressed like a beggar, wandering the streets. "We hired someone to follow you. We're worried." "Worried about my health or about your inheritance?" Thomas asked calmly, his voice icy. Victoria sighed dramatically. "Don't be unfair. You're sick, undergoing chemotherapy, and instead of resting you're playing homeless around the city. That's not normal behavior. Normal would be spending my last months locked in a mansion while the two of you make spreadsheets about how to divide my empire." Thomas's voice rose a notch. "Do you know how many times you visited me in the hospital last month? 2. 2 visits in 30 days. And both times you only talked about stocks, investments, and succession." Daniel crossed his arms defensively. "Someone has to think about the company's future. You built this over 40 years. You can't just let everything collapse because you're having an existential crisis." "Existential crisis?" Thomas stood up abruptly from his chair. "I am dying, Daniel. Dying. And the only thing you're capable of feeling is fear that I'll give the money away before I go." Victoria exchanged a quick glance with her brother. It was a look Thomas shouldn't have seen, but he did. A look of complicity. Of strategy. "Dad, no one is talking about donations. But considering your current emotional state, we think it would be wise for you to sign a power of attorney. Temporary, of course. Just until you recover." Power of attorney. Thomas repeated the word as if it were poison. "You want me to hand over control of the company to you. Now I understand." "It's for your own good," Daniel insisted. "And for the good of all the employees who depend on this company. You're not in a condition to make important decisions." Thomas sat down again, pretending to consider the proposal. He watched his children closely. Daniel had his eyes, but none of his compassion. Victoria had the smile of his late wife, but used it as a weapon instead of a gift. Where had he gone wrong raising them? At what moment had money replaced empathy in their hearts? "I'll think about it," Thomas lied. "Give me a few days." The two left satisfied, convinced they had planted the right seed. Thomas waited until the office was completely empty before making the call. His lawyer, Robert Chun, always answered, no matter the hour. "Robert, I need you to prepare confidential documents. Very confidential." Thomas took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to leave 70% of my assets and the company's controlling shares to a specific beneficiary. The rest will be divided into charitable funds." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Thomas, are you sure? And your children?" "My children will receive enough to live comfortably, but not enough to continue being the empty people they've become." He gave Isabel's information to Robert. "This girl knows nothing yet. And she cannot know until my death. I want you to prepare everything, but keep it in absolute secrecy." "This will generate a massive legal battle," Robert warned. "Daniel and Victoria won't accept this quietly. Let them sue." Thomas felt a strange peace take over him. "Make the reasons very clear in the will. I want every situation documented. Every visit they didn't make. Every time they chose money over their dying father. And above all, I want documented the day a poor girl with $5 in her pocket showed more humanity than my own millionaire children." After hanging up, Thomas opened the desk drawer and took out the crumpled $5 bill Isabel had given him. He had kept it in his jacket pocket since that rainy day. It was the physical reminder that kindness still existed in this world. That his money could make a real difference in the hands of someone who truly cared. Outside, the city was beginning to darken. Thomas looked out the window from the 30th floor, watching the lights turn on one by one. Somewhere down below, Isabel was probably starting her night shift at the diner, with no idea that her life was about to change completely. Unaware that a simple act of kindness had rewritten the destiny of an entire empire, Thomas began frequenting the diner where Isabel worked. Always in disguise, always watching from a distance. He wanted absolute certainty that that moment in the supermarket had not been a fortunate coincidence or a calculated performance. He needed to know whether her kindness was genuine or just a well-crafted mask. In the first week, he witnessed Isabel share her own meal with a man who was clearly intoxicated and begging for food at the door. The manager yelled at her, threatening to deduct it from her paycheck. Isabel simply lowered her head and went back to work without complaining. Thomas mentally noted every detail. In the second week, he saw a customer deliberately spill hot coffee on her uniform and then complain about the service to avoid paying the bill. Isabel cleaned up the mess with tears in her eyes, yet still apologized to the man. When the guy left laughing, she locked herself in the bathroom for 5 minutes. Thomas almost revealed his identity right then to defend the girl, but he restrained himself. In the third week, he followed Isabel to the pharmacy after her shift. She bought expensive medicine for her mother and stood counting coins at the counter with trembling hands. She was $6 short. The pharmacist was inflexible. Isabel left without the medication, crying silently on the empty street. Thomas paid for the medicine anonymously and asked that it be delivered to her address, saying it was a municipal social program. Meanwhile, Robert Chun worked discreetly on the legal documents. He created a shielded structure that would protect the will from challenges. He established trust funds, appointed independent executors, and meticulously documented every meeting between Thomas and his children over the past 6 months. Audio recordings of conversations about inheritance would be irrefutable evidence. "I have everything ready," Robert reported one rainy afternoon. "But Thomas, have you thought about the impact this will have on this girl's life? She's 17. Overnight she'll become one of the richest women in the country. This could destroy her." "That's why I'm preparing something more," Thomas revealed, opening a thick folder. "I've created an advisory council to guide her. People I trust whom I've met over my lifetime. Ethical businesspeople, true philanthropists, educators. They will guide her in the first years. I've also established a gradual schedule for access to the full fortune. She will receive everything little by little, as she demonstrates maturity to manage it." Robert examined the documents, impressed. "You've thought of every detail." "I spent 40 years building this empire thinking only about profit," Thomas said with a tired voice. "Now I want to spend my last months making sure it serves to build something greater. Kindness. Justice. Hope." The medical exams the following week brought devastating news. The cancer had spread faster than expected. Thomas had at most 3 months to live, maybe less. He didn't tell Daniel and Victoria. He saw no point in giving them another opportunity to pretend concern. Instead, he intensified his visits to the diner. On a particularly busy Thursday, Thomas was sitting in the corner when he saw Isabel defend a coworker from harassment by an aggressive customer. The older woman was being touched inappropriately, and Isabel intervened without hesitation, even knowing she could lose her job. "Sir, I need to ask you to respect my coworker or you'll have to leave," Isabel said with a firm voice despite the visible fear in her eyes. The man was big, intimidating. "Who do you think you are, girl? I'll get you fired." "Then fire me," Isabel replied, lifting her chin. "But I won't stand here watching someone be disrespected. No matter how much money you have." The manager came running, ready to fire Isabel and calm the important customer. But Thomas stood up from the table and walked toward them. He dropped his wallet again, this time deliberately open, showing several black credit cards and a corporate identification that the manager immediately recognized. "This young woman is absolutely right," Thomas said with a commanding voice he hadn't used in weeks. "And if you really value money, you should know that I am Thomas Westwood, owner of half the commercial real estate in this city, including the building where this diner operates." The silence was sepulchral. The aggressive customer ran out. The manager turned pale. Isabel's eyes widened in shock, finally recognizing the man she had helped in the supermarket weeks earlier. "You," she whispered. "That day, the wallet." Thomas smiled wearily. "May I speak with you in private? It's important." They sat at a table away from the others. Thomas held a thick envelope he had brought especially for this moment. Inside was a letter explaining everything. His intentions. His plan. His will. It wasn't mandatory to tell her beforehand, but Thomas wanted Isabel to know the truth while he was still alive to answer her questions. "Isabel, what I'm going to tell you will sound impossible," he began, his voice breaking. "But I need you to understand that every word is true. That day in the supermarket, you didn't just return my wallet. You restored my faith in humanity." Isabel listened in absolute silence as Thomas revealed his terminal diagnosis, the test he had carried out, the disappointment with his children, and finally the decision to leave everything to her. When he finished, tears were streaming down the girl's face. "I can't accept this," she said, trembling. "I didn't do anything special. I just returned what was yours." "Exactly," Thomas replied, holding her hands. "In a world where everyone wants to take what isn't theirs, you gave it back. Where everyone ignores the suffering of others, you helped. That is so rare that it's worth more than all my money." Thomas Westwood passed away on a November morning, surrounded only by nurses and his lawyer, Robert Chun. Daniel and Victoria were traveling in Europe when they received the news. They returned immediately, not out of grief, but out of interest. The will was to be read within 48 hours. The meeting room at the law firm was cold when everyone gathered. Daniel entered first, adjusting the expensive black suit he had bought specifically for the occasion. Victoria followed, trying to look sad behind her costly sunglasses. Both sat in the main chairs, confident that all of this was merely a formality. Isabel arrived 15 minutes later, wearing the only decent dress she owned. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. She didn't understand why she had been summoned to this meeting. Thomas had died only 3 days after revealing his plans, before they could speak more deeply about the future. "What is this girl doing here?" Daniel asked disdainfully as soon as he saw Isabel enter. Robert Chun ignored the question and opened the folder containing the official documents. "We are here for the reading of Thomas Westwood's will. I ask for absolute silence until I finish." The lawyer's voice echoed through the room, reading each clause with surgical clarity. Daniel and Victoria listened with increasingly confused expressions. When Robert reached the main part of the will, the silence became dense as concrete. "I leave 70% of all my assets, including controlling shares of Westwood Enterprises, to Isabel Morales, for the reasons I will detail below." Robert paused, letting the words sink in. "My children Daniel and Victoria will each receive 10% of the assets in trust funds managed by third parties. The remaining 10% will go to charitable institutions." Daniel stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This is impossible." He was crazy. Sick. That girl obviously manipulated him. "Sit down, Daniel," Robert ordered firmly. Thomas anticipated exactly this reaction. That is why he left this video. The large screen on the wall lit up, showing Thomas sitting in a chair, clearly recorded days before his death. He looked tired, but his voice was strong and lucid. "Daniel, Victoria, if you are watching this, it means you already know my decision. I know you are furious. I know you will claim mental insanity. That is why I recorded this testimony with 3 medical witnesses present, all attesting to my full cognitive capacity." Thomas took a deep breath in the recording. "I spent the last months of my life discovering who you really are. I dressed as a beggar, and you passed me on the street without recognizing your own father. I pretended to be in need, and you didn't even ask if I required help." Victoria began to cry, but the tears seemed more of anger than sadness. On the screen, Thomas continued. "I documented every visit you failed to make to the hospital. Every call where you prioritized business over my health. Every conversation in which you showed more interest in my money than in my life. You tried to declare me incapable of running the company. You tried to manipulate me into signing powers of attorney. Everything is recorded. Everything is documented." Thomas leaned forward in the recording, his eyes fixed on the camera as if he could see through time. "Isabel, if you are watching this, it means you accepted my decision. I know you are scared. I know it seems overwhelming. But listen carefully, you returned my wallet when you could have kept everything. You offered your last $5 to a stranger who seemed in need. You defended coworkers even at the risk of losing your job. You bought medicine for your mother instead of spending on yourself. These actions define true character. Isabel covered her face with her hands, sobbing. On the screen, Thomas smiled gently. I am not giving you this money as a gift or a reward. I am giving it to you as a responsibility. As a tool to do the good my children never did. I built this empire thinking only of profit. Now you can transform it into something that truly matters. Help people like you. Hire people like you. Be the change this cynical world desperately needs. The video ended with Thomas giving a small farewell wave. The room remained in absolute silence for long seconds. Daniel exploded. This will not stand. We will sue. We will prove that this tramp manipulated a sick and vulnerable man. Try, Robert said calmly. Thomas left 17 audio recordings of conversations with you. 23 medical reports attesting to his sanity. 46 pages documenting every meeting in the last 6 months. Dozens of witnesses who observed Isabel's character. Any judge reviewing this case will see the truth with crystal clarity. Victoria tried a different approach, turning to Isabel with a pleading expression. You don't understand what you're doing. This company has thousands of employees. Immense responsibilities. You're just a girl. A poor and uneducated girl. You will destroy everything our father built. Isabel wiped her tears and stood slowly. Her voice came out low but firm. Your father didn't build this alone. Thousands of workers like me did. People who wake up early, take 3 buses, work to the bone for minimum wage while you dine in $1,000 per plate restaurants. She took a deep breath. I don't know if I will be a good manager, but I know I will never forget where I came from. And I will never value money over people. Daniel took a threatening step toward her, but Robert stood between them. The meeting is over. Isabel, I need you to sign these documents. Daniel, Victoria, you have legal rights to the 10% stipulated. I suggest you accept it with dignity. The siblings left the room shouting, promising endless legal battles. Isabel stayed behind, looking out the window at the city below. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable. Isabel didn't move to a mansion. She continued living in the same small apartment with her mother and brother, only renovating the place and paying off all debts. The first thing she did with the money was ensure proper medical treatment for her mother, who finally overcame the disease that had consumed her for years. Westwood Enterprises underwent profound changes. Isabel increased all entry-level employees' salaries by 40%. She implemented comprehensive health insurance and created an educational fund for workers' children. She opened daycare centers within the company so single mothers wouldn't have to choose between work and family. Executives who protested were replaced by people who understood that profit and humanity were not opposing concepts. Daniel and Victoria attempted to sue, as they had promised. They spent fortunes on expensive lawyers who scrutinized every comma of the will. After 4 months and dozens of hearings, the judge definitively closed the case. The evidence was irrefutable. The will was legitimate. Thomas's sanity was indisputable. The siblings were ordered to pay court costs. More painful than the legal defeat was what happened publicly. The media uncovered the full story. Investigative journalists found the recordings, videos, and documents. The internet exploded with debates about privilege, character, and true legacy. Daniel and Victoria became symbols of everything wrong with millionaire heirs. They were exposed, humiliated, and rejected by the very social elite that had always embraced them. Isabel could have celebrated their downfall. But she did not. In an interview that went viral worldwide, she said something no one expected. I am not angry at Daniel and Victoria. I feel pity. They grew up in a world where money replaced affection. Where success was measured in bank balances instead of acts of kindness. Thomas gave me a fortune, but my mother gave me something far more valuable. She taught me that true wealth is in how you treat people when no one is watching. Her words touched millions. Letters began arriving from around the world. People shared stories about small acts of kindness that changed their lives. A teacher who paid for a poor student's lunch. A bus driver who waited for an elderly woman to cross the street. A doctor who treated a family for free because they couldn't afford it. Simple stories, but profoundly human. Isabel created the Thomas Westwood Foundation with the specific goal of finding and supporting people like her. Kind people overlooked by society. The program worked like this. Anyone could nominate someone who had shown extraordinary kindness in difficult circumstances. A team investigated each case. The chosen ones received scholarships, help to start their own businesses, or simply financial support to get out of desperate situations. The first beneficiary was a 14-year-old boy who shared his school lunch every day with a classmate who was hungry. The second was a nurse who used her own salary to buy medicine for poor patients who couldn't afford it. The third was a mall security guard who saved a child from drowning on his day off. Real stories of quiet heroism finally receiving recognition. Isabel finished high school and began studying business administration at university. Not because she needed the degree to maintain the empire, but because she wanted to honor the gift she had received by learning to do better. She continued working, but now at the central office, observing, learning, growing. One afternoon, she visited Thomas's grave. She brought simple flowers, the kind sold at street corners. She sat on the grass next to the marble headstone and began to speak softly. "Mr. Westwood, I know you may not be able to hear me, but I need to thank you. Not for the money. For what the money allowed me to do. Today we have helped 143 families escape extreme poverty. We built 2 schools in neglected neighborhoods. We paid for surgeries that saved 17 lives. And all of this because you believed that a poor girl in a supermarket was worth more than your own millionaire children." The wind swayed the trees around her. Isabel wiped her tears and smiled. "Those $5 I gave you that day? I realized it was all I had left until my next paycheck. I was going to go to sleep hungry that night just to give that money to you. But I don't regret it for a second. Because you taught me that kindness isn't about what you have. It's about what you are willing to share." Daniel and Victoria never recovered from their social fall. They lived comfortably with the 10% they inherited, but they were empty people in empty houses. They tried to reconnect with Isabel months later, but she politely declined. Not out of revenge, but because she knew they still weren't ready to truly understand what their father had tried to teach. The story of Isabel and Thomas became legendary. Books were written. Films were proposed. But Isabel herself declined all offers to turn her life into entertainment. She preferred to let the acts speak for themselves. 5 years after that day in the supermarket, Isabel was at a corporate event when a girl in a cleaning uniform accidentally dropped a tray. Expensive champagne glasses shattered on the marble floor. Executives rolled their eyes. Some laughed. The girl froze, terrified of losing her job. Isabel stood, removed her high heels, and knelt on the floor to help pick up the shards of glass. Everyone present fell silent, shocked at the billionaire CEO dirtying her gala dress to help an employee. "What's your name?" Isabel asked gently as they worked together. "Camila," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "Camila, accidents happen. Don't worry. It's okay." In that moment, Isabel fully understood the cycle Thomas had started. Kindness generates kindness. Compassion generates compassion. And true legacies are not built in bank vaults, but in hearts transformed by simple acts of humanity. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment below what you thought and where you're watching from. Your interaction helps more people discover stories that inspire real change.